So, when I said the talk, I wanted to have, and I think it was part of what was needed, like have traces of FluCoMa. Not for the ERC telling them that why they've paid money, but mostly for us to, how is your piece tomorrow going to take bits of the tool set, which we know was full of potentials and impossible to tackle as one big thing. And how can you make something? In my case, when I started, I said, oh, that's a good question for them. They have one piece to do, and they've had 14 months of kind of massage. That's the beginning of the third year for us. I've seen many, many versions of it. It's my third piece with the tool sets. And actually, I've got too many things to say, which is by default my modus operandi, as you know. But in this case, very specific, I've got a page of different things to say for each of the pieces, and 3 pieces have been composed with a tool set. But funnily enough, none of the things I've done especially because all the beautiful moments, I've given them to you already. All the examples that I've posted online, all the help files, all the crazy stuff you've received for the last 14 months has been my coding with the objects, every time I found something that, ooh, that's fun, I threw it your way. So in effect, there's not much I can say to you, but because this is YouTubed, then maybe other people will have something interesting. And therefore I decided, okay, focus Tremblay, you got to focus, take one piece, the latest, the one that was premiered yesterday, and it didn't crash. And to your honor, guys, it didn't crash with the latest alpha of the second toolbox. I forgot to change the externals. Could have been a catastrophe. I was at the tip of the compile, and it worked. So we're gig ready for real.
Did you notice before or after?
I noticed today. I had like a kind of vertigo. I said, ha, ha, ha. And not only it worked for the gig, but it worked for the whole recording sessions the afternoon as well. So beating the patch in and out of the tune. So, but you'll see I don't use much. But those 3 objects I use from us, they work. Anyway, so I said, focus. What can you do? I'll take one piece. I'll take the latest. I'll show some of the traces because through 14 months of composition, I've used FluCoMa in many different ways. And from my few pages of bullet points, I will take 3 small examples. One that shows a slow pace composition time, which doesn't even use a single object of fluid corpus manipulation of our objects. And you'll see what I mean by this. One that is fast composition time, and you're in the studio, you're in the flow, and you need something to happen. And the real-time bits I've used, both of which you already have seen. So I'm going to go quite quick because they're already shared with you. So, because it's late in the day, I will start with a take-home message. So from then on, you can zoom out if you disagree. Fundamentally, so far the project, as I said earlier with a smile, there's a confirmation bias thing going on. It's going well in line with what we're trying to do, and I'm happy with this. The first conclusion and the first trace of FluCoMa is you. So I want to thank you all. And it might sound cheesy, but that's very important. This context of being paid to be a researcher for real is something that doesn't happen in academia anymore, and in our field especially. And I've been 2.5 years full-time focused on something. It's still too many hours a week, you can ask my family, but at least I'm not doing anything else. And therefore, I can focus these questions, which means I had time to learn stuff, I had time to do trial and error, and most importantly, there was a safe space for dumb questions, which was very important. Ear training was crucial. All the tools that you have got flavors. None of them sound good, but none of the technology out there sound good anyway. But you have time to explore these algorithms at a new level, and that was very good for me. And that was a conclusion Owen said in our EMS paper, that artifacts are ear training. And it's quite important. Depth as well. So the ability to work with descriptors. I've worked with descriptors of sort since 2006. 2007 in real time, and if you count pitch and amplitude, from 1998. I start to think that I start to understand how bad they are now, their quirks, that none of them describe anything else than the model that is implemented under them, and how they kind of misbehave properly, or consistently misbehave, each of them. And that was allowed by the project, but also by your questions. Some of you once in a while on the forum, some of you in the plenary, and that space was for me an immense success. And my music, therefore, of yesterday would not be the same if you hadn't been there. Some of you probably prodding me annoyingly, and some of you hugging me passionately. So that people interaction was super important. Obviously, the two collaborators were essential. They didn't laugh at me too often with my questions and ambitions, and that was very useful. But that's a trace of FluCoMa that I will showcase. I'm just giving you the take-home message, and I'll show you in action. Other more or less frequent, Alex and Rod win the annoying ones with love. You know, it's never mean. It's always full of love and very active. But what it confirms is that this hybrid approach, where agonism or agonistic relationships are rich, misunderstanding is good, and if you have a safe space where you can actually negotiate this, it is important. And Hans says that to me every time he's leaving. You say, "This space was amazing," like time space where we share, and you're not aware of this until somebody points at you and you just say, "Actually, you're right. There is a community there that happened," and that's the first take-home message. And the second take-home message, no, that's all of it. So how does that actually gel in the piece? That sounds a bit like very top-down and a bit of a political congratulation. It was not. It's definitely heartfelt, and you see how it is. So the piece yesterday, for those of you who have not heard it, I'll describe it in 3 words. Formally, it's interested in cross-cutting. I read quite interestingly what film editors are doing, very self-aware, how they manipulate material to bring forward a kind of plot in the widest sense of that word. And in this case of my piece, how I can make a clear contrasting strand to co-evolve into various ways of merging, so hybrids or confrontation, but beyond the kind of stacking. And I thought the film editors in the cinema industry are very aware of the power of editing. And that's what I was playing with. And in terms of material, you had a bit of Ikeda that meets a bit of the Berlin Reductionists, that meets a bit of Muraille, but properly dirty instead of clean, with a bit of downtown Zorn. That's a bit of what I was trying to hybridize. Yes?
Can you play a bit of it?
No. So you had to be there, and soon you'll be recording. Well, I'll play a very small bit later as my examples. So now, this is what it's all about. Now, I'm going to give you 3 small traces, like top-down, chronological. The first one is one that I told you was slow time. As part of my job in the project, I had to explore other ways of doing things, hence knowing about the other software who do agglomeration. The one thing I was obsessed with that gig was to try to find ways of doing proper orchestration-based, concatenative-based orchestration. And so I tried Orchidée, and I got the result Orchidée gives you, which are not very exciting, nor very customizable. You get something, and that's something, you like it or you hate it. At one point, Sam Pluta said, you should talk to Ben Hackbart, who's just next door. I said, okay, and his audio guide. So I learned audio guide, and as I was learning audio guide and I was learning different his paradigm of using descriptors in time and how he does that, I started to understand there were things that were not working. But for instance, the EarCam database doesn't work because they normalized amplitude. So you cannot use amplitude in there. And there's a lot of problems with the database you have access to. So I had to do some of my own, and that was awful. But it's also that the sounds I use to try to orchestrate are very, very, very not made for this. And I'll give you a very specific example, which a musician who has basic, I would not say basic, but a musician that has some kind of, where is it? Some kind of ear training, here it is, will be able to empathize. I wanted this sound. To be played on a violin. So I fight against audio guide, which is very good, very well done, super well documented, basic examples. I can't get it to work. I always get rubbish. And then because I'm surrounded by wise people, I say to Owen, I say, Owen, what's happening? This is easy. Écrasé on the violin and a harmonic, vaguely. On the violin, you have two pitch spaces that if you've written for violin once in your life, you will know it's not super hard to think of to write this. And why do I not get this? Like, the sounds are right there, I can pick them. And he says, maybe, PA, you listen differently to the, sorry, a bit high for my height, and the, there are two different modes of listening. So when you actually try to do matching in your brains, when you're in the pitch bit, you might overweight the pitch component and downplay the timbral component. And when you go to the scratchy bit, you might actually care more about certain times of iterativeness, and so a kind of timbral descriptor would fit better. So, wow, you're clever. I'm happy. So I went away and I looked at the tools and there was no way. So I write to Ben Hagbart and I say, hey, Ben, what would you do with this sound? Because Ben is super approachable, super kind. He says, oh. So Ben comes over here, he gives a presentation in the CCL, which is a great thing Alex leads here, and then we talk, and I play him this, and he says, I couldn't do. So I said, look what I've done. I've used NMF to split the two components, the pitch one side and the noise on the other side, and when I do matching like this, I get much more clever things. And then I talk about the multi-descriptor approach, that one might be better matched. And from that discussion, the next version of Audio Guide has got these two features installed in it. You can now go to Audio Guide and see a thanks to PA in there. And the thing, I don't want any credit, Audio Guide is not my work, but what is the trace of FluCoMa in there is that without a community of like-minded people pushing the thing differently, Ben is alone. And I'm alone. But me having talked to Owen about a specific sound I wanted to do a specific way and bouncing these ideas, then talking to Ben, he's implemented an NMF splitting, and he's also implemented a conditional searching. So if you have this amount of noisiness, search with these kind of descriptors. If you have this amount of pitchness, search with these other descriptors. If it's too loud, if it's too low. Now, you keep this in mind for tomorrow's presentation. How descriptors misbehave in extremes and how to deal with descriptor space. I'll talk about that more tomorrow. But this was the first example. But the example he sent me before I wanted to try the software, because I'm a practitioner. If it doesn't convince me with sound, I'm not going to try it. This is what he sent me after his first prototype. We're much, much, much nearer than the first thing that was just gibberish. The segments fit, we have about the same rhythm. When it's noisy, it's noisy. When it's pitchy, it's pitchy. I need to overweight the pitch importance in the pitch part, but that was the first prototype. I'm not cheating there. So it shows you that discussion, traces of FluCoMa number 1, at slow pace, I've learned something, I've built vocabulary, and I've learned the limits of my ignorance and the limits of the tools I'm using, and around a community of like-minded people who understand these questions. Yes, I was very happy. Because in the piece, which you will hear now, this is used, but I had to transcribe it manually because there was a deadline, and that discussion happened after the deadline. So it took me about half an hour, and I should have done that the first time round, you say, instead of spending 50 hours learning Audio Guide. But no, that was not the point. This is where the FluCoMa kicks in. The second example of traces of FluCoMa is, as I said to you, the quick one in the studio. And that happens when you compose a sound, and you have a sound like this. So this is a sound I really much like. It's mastered, so it should be loud enough. It's a quad sound, and it's been made with this. Actually, I could do this instead. Let's see how it behaves. Oh, yeah. So, oh, yes, I said. Yay! So, this is a kind of synthesis I had fun to do when I was teaching the student. I take a microphone, a very dirty one, and I make something like this. We could call it acousmatic cliché whoosh bang in a microphone. And then I took accordion chords, and I go in Audio Sculpt, and I say, hey, do me some kind of cheap LPC. And I do a cheap LPC, which is, I think, 3 bands. I choke the LPC to the lowest number of counts, so 3, 5, and 7. And I get 3 different contour of the accordion, and it creates this wonderful sound. So dramatic. Now, as beautiful as this is, if I need a variation on these sounds, there's no way. Like this was done a year and a half ago. It's my pile of detritus. I like it to bits. It fits the tune, and I want to have a variation on this. I say, aha, this is where FluCoMa can kick in. I say, what I want to do is I would like to create a spectral variation which keeps the same kind of morphology, the same pitches, but if you put that in a delay, it sounds like a mess. One of my old rapper production trick is to put pitch component in delay, like and keep the dry drums and stuff in your face. So you have kind of, I say, if I was able, oh yes, I am able. HPSS exists for me. Now, HPSS, you could do that in some software, but the problem with when you do the software thing is that either you do it in real time, it's a pain, or you do it in non-real time and you have to wait for the rendering. I say, aha, FluCoMa's got objects. Let's do that. So what have I done, in effect, is a very dirty 5-minute patch where I add the real-time version, the real-time version running, and sending that simply to different settings, very dirty garage, and comparing different settings, making a preset. And when I'm happy, because we carefully thought about interface, the same interface is plugged in the non-real-time version, and therefore I could just have to press, and it makes the full buffer, and I'm happy. I've got the non-real-time version. So I was able to tweak the parameters by ear of what I wanted to do until I was happy with the component. Not only that, but then what I did, because it's rendered at one place, I did that, and I went into my other session, and I was able to get this, which is you'll notice it's not perfectly separated. I don't care. Kind of bubbly pitch. And this one, just tighter. You lose all the long pitch. You just keep the short one. I say, this is good. I'm going to keep it tight. This doesn't sound MP3. The other one does. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to process the pitch material that is bubbly into a kind of complicated quad feedbacking delay. Create a kind of very thin tail, and then keep my front end tight and sexy. EQ'd a bit because I've lost a bit of top end, added a bit of early reflection to create a bit of density, and you create this. And I said, wow, this is great. That was a simple, but that took me 5 minutes. And then when I did in the DAW, I was not happy. This is the second version. So I was able to go back to Max and say, oh, I haven't got enough pitch, or I've got too much noisiness or whatever, and change the parameter by ear. No, oh, okay, it's working. Now, you say I should maybe do a plugin to do that in real time. I should, but that would take more than 5 minutes. This was really quick sound design use I needed, and I've done many of these variations on the sounds, just taking a sound as it is and not having to care at the moment. I'm jamming with all my modular synths that my ear fatigue brings that top end unusable and stuff like this. I could just have fun with my clicks and my tinnitus and all that stuff, and then use finished, composite, complex material and split it in layers to make variations. I was very happy with this. Affordances. And then finally, the real-time version. That's real-time. So this is a typical approach I do, so maquette. And there are 2 tasks I wanted to do. One of them is incredibly cheesy. I'll start with this one. So at the end of the piece, the whole band goes into delays. The same delays that are called cheesy delays in your help patch. That's where I took it from. And the way I've done that in the real-time, let me just... It's lush delays, and when I put, you can imagine with the percussion, the spillover of the piano and all of that, I don't want to have that in delays that feedback for 30, 40 repeats. So what I wanted to do is to remove as much as possible all the pitch material, all the noise material, and just send the pitch. So that's what I do up there. So there's an HPSS, which is at 256, which is very short, but with incredibly short permissive filter size. So everything that is 3 is considered, and then remove that. So in effect, the only thing you get is like the long pitches in the bubbly vibe, but then sending bubbly in so many delays, you don't feel the bubbly anymore. You just feel like, whoa. I can give you the patch, Hans, no trouble. And then we had problem with the low end, so instead of limiting somewhere clever, just put a high pass filter, and that's it. And it goes into delay, and suddenly you have this kind of lush. That's one of the real-time use of the object. Very simple, straight to the point, it works, I'm happy. The clever bit you already have seen. So there was this problem. You'll say, Pierre, you gave us this example of the slice number. The piece is for Wet Ink, which has real-time electronics by the very hyperactive Sam Pluta, which you will see tomorrow joining us. As you know, like he likes his stuttering stuff on the laptop. So I have a line in the violin that sounds like this. That's the line of earlier, by the way. So that was my little synth noisy line. The problem is when you say to Pluta, do a duet with this guy, what comes out is this from him. So what I want to do musically with this, in the section that follows, is a trick I wanted to do for ages, but I couldn't redo, is a reorganizing of the slice, a random shuffler that is sentence-based. So I know that I've got about 40 elements in there. I know that Pluta might add some or less. So what I did is the algorithm that you all saw, which is the number of slice cutter with a permission. So I just said, record this bit, and when you finish that, in the background thread, finishing that process, what you can do is literally take your time, give me 40 slice plus minus 10, find the threshold, whatever, and reorder those. And the result is completely consistent, independent of threshold, independent of Pluta, and that gives him a lot of freedom, which I want to give him as an improviser. That would not have been possible for me to do before FluCoMa, both for time reason and for object existence reason, because this is segmented on novelty. Because if I segment on amplitude, I don't know what Pluto is going to do. I want to have some like kind of the things that pop out. Give me 30 slice on the 30 biggest differences. That's what I want. And it works incredibly well in the background. And the second part of that process is once they've done together, played the first half, there's a processing which you see in the pitch held file, in which he takes their jamming of the second section where they play above themselves. That's recorded all this, and it takes only the pitch component. Again, knowing my man Sam Pluta, I knew that some of the elements will be pitchy, but some of them will be noisy. What I wanted to have is a kind of pad reminiscence. So I've done basic granulation with the pitch material that has immense confidence and is within a certain frequency band. If it's not like this, it doesn't exist. I know there will always be a bit because I wrote the violin part. So I know there will be at least a few grains to a few hundred grains. And it's a background part and it works. And it's in the patch. I can give you the patch with pleasure. So these are my traces of FluCoMa. As you can see, I took 3 just to show you 3 different ways I thought about it. Questions?